Hi, I'm Jazz Obrecht, and welcome to my Talking Guitar podcast with one of the great sonic visionaries of rock guitar, Lee Ranaldo. Done on August 5th, 1995, this interview covers two sides of Lee. One of these is his work with Thurston Moore, Kim Gordon, and Steve Shelley in Sonic Youth. Before I spoke with Lee, the band had sent me the unmixed tracks for what would become their Washing Machine album. Lee also sent me East Jesus, his unaccompanied, almost symphonic improvisations on this solo album inspired me to describe them at the time as lush, edgy, off-balancing, and rife with guitar figures that conjure the booming foghorn and crying gull, the rush of airplanes, and the numbing pound of steel mill. In addition to covering his solo playing and the tracks on Sonic Youth's Washing Machine, Lee talks about the influence of a mutual hero of ours, Jorma Kaukonen, as well as Neil Young, with whom the band had recently toured. He also offers sage advice for players wishing to expand their style and venture in new directions. Here's my complete conversation with the man Rolling Stone ranked at number 33 on its list of the greatest guitarists of all time. I hope you enjoy it.
Hi.
Hi, Lee. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Once again, my apologies about being late for this whole thing.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing great, man.
Yeah?
We're at the magazine here. Several of us are really knocked out by East Jesus.
Oh, really?
Man,
thanks a lot.
What a record.
Thanks.
I've heard a lot of guitar records, but never anything quite like this.
Wow, cool. Thanks a lot. I'm never sure how visible all those small little records like that are. I'm really glad about that one. That one came out pretty fun.
It's impossible not to have a reaction to that music, and sometimes to me it's physical.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. That was a really fun record to make.
Yeah, like
Time
Stands Still it reminded me of working in the Ford steel mill.
Yeah. Well, some of that's exactly what it was supposed to be back then. When I made that stuff, it was supposed to be sort of real mechanical repetition machine music, because we're always in love with like repetitive mechanical sounds that we hear. So, that stuff's compiled. A lot of it's unreleased previously, but some like that one is from that first record I did, From Here to Infinity. The bridge.
The cooter-like slide.
Yeah. That was actually the very first spoken word type musical thing I ever tried to do, and that was from this cassette release back in the mid-'80s called from the Tellus cassettes. I guess they do CDs now. It was at the time, and the one that one was called All Guitars, and it was just like 25 or 35 guitarists doing different things, and that was mine. That was the lead track on that record, and I don't know. I always liked that track. Everybody seemed to always be into that track, and it didn't get very widespread attention at the time, that release. Although people heard it.
Real interesting slide sound.
Oh, thanks.
What was that?
It's mostly probably involved with the tuning of it. I mean, it was just a simple regular old slide on a 12-string with a specific tuning, which I don't even know what the tuning was at this point. But that's pretty much what's going on there.
You mind if I ask you a few more questions?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I'd like to know what's going on in that song, the track called Some Distortion. Like, how many tracks of guitar do people hear in that?
It's either one or two. I think it's one, actually.
Wow, I mean, it sounds like foghorns and seagulls.
Yeah, that track, I don't know exactly where that track came from. I mean, I know it was sort of done around the same time as I was doing a lot of that other stuff, but I just sort of came upon it, in a tape box while I was putting together that record, and I hadn't heard it or remembered even doing it. I certainly hadn't heard it in like probably 8 or 10 years, and I really loved it.
It's extremely cinematic.
Yeah. There was just something about the whole shape of it that I thought was really beautiful. I was really happy to be able to release that.
How much of that song do you think was actually done with your fingers on a fretboard?
A lot of it.
Yeah.
Which, when you say fingers, you mean left hand?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of it probably.
Huh.
Yeah.
And there's something that sounds like you're dropping something on strings.
Onto the strings. Yeah, I was doing some stuff with like little steel rods and things at that time, and I was probably playing around with those, with like dropping them on the strings, or maybe it was even hitting the strings right over the pickup with my fist or something like that. You know, it's kind of hard to remember because it was a while ago.
What do you do to get a foghorn sound?
Um,
That's a new one to me. I've never heard that on guitar before.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been a really low-tuned string played behind the bridge, like on a guitar that had a nice, like a Jaguar or a Jazzmaster that had a lot of action behind the bridge, a lot of string behind the bridge.
Yeah.
It might have been something like that, but I'm really not sure.
Not
sure.
One more technical question on
Sure.
that record. The bell sound of Live #1 Paradiso.
Uh-huh.
How do you make the bells?
The bells might be on tape.
Oh, real bells.
Yeah, those might be real bells on tape if it's from the live gig, because I use bell sounds a lot in the live gigs, just because I really like the way they resonate and how the overtones that they have, and they seem to relate a lot to the kind of overtones you can get out of a guitar, like a chiming kind of guitar. So they're probably actually like from some BBC sound library, Westminster chimes or something like that.
I saw where you did that concert 5 with 6 Live.
Uh-huh.
How often do you get to play outside of Sonic Youth and do those types of things?
The last couple of years, pretty often, actually, just because, in part, we took a pretty good hiatus the last year up till the time of making this record, just because of Thurston and Kim's baby and various, we just wanted to try some different things. Everybody had other things going on that they wanted to do. I mean, we all released a bunch of different records in various guises during that period. And I do a fair amount of solo stuff, and I did quite a lot of duet stuff with this drummer William Hooker, this free jazz drummer. We have one release that's out on Knitting Factory. That's a concert we did about a year and a half ago, and it was a lot of spoken word and playing, drums, and I played guitar and synth, and that's called Envisioning. They'd probably send it to you if you call them up over there at the Knitting Factory. This woman named Stephanie sort of handles that stuff. And he and I actually have another record about ready to go. It's not sure who's going to do it yet, but it's actually a trio with electric harpist Zena Parkins.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we've done a bunch of stuff, William and I together as a duo, and then trios, usually with Zena, but we did one with Melvin Gibbs one time, and so we've got a little flexible thing going there that's really fun to do, just because it's really extemporaneous and spontaneous, and we seem to have a pretty cool thing worked out together.
How would you compare playing that with playing in Sonic Youth?
Well, they're two sides of the coin. The Sonic Youth thing is as much about structure as it is about free improv. It sort of straddles the line between the two, and it's a lot more about song structure. And the other one is much more. What I like about the other thing is the ability to indulge in just the pure extreme sound and tone of it, which we do in Sonic Youth, but then, for whatever reasons, because that's the way Sonic Youth is, and because we pull back from that, we go in and out of that, like just dealing with the pure sounds, and then pull back into song structures. And, that's what Sonic Youth's audience is accustomed to, and, that's probably why the audience is so large. I mean, there's never as large an audience for all instrumental, improvised music. It's funny because that kind of improvised music that both Thurston and I have done, gotten a fair amount of playing in on the last few years. It's really been a New York tradition, I mean, as well as other places, obviously, but like all through the late 70s and all through the 80s, at a time when we really didn't want to have anything to do with improvised music. I mean, there were tons of people doing it, from, like Elliott Sharp and Arto Lindsay and Zorn and everybody else. And it's only been in the last like half decade or so that we've had a much more specific interest in it, whether it comes from listening to a lot more jazz or maybe the sort of fractured nature of the rock scene at this point has left us wanting something that wasn't being fulfilled there, or, who knows exactly why.
Which of the improvisational guys would you go out of your way to see?
There's a lot of those guys that I would like to see, now and again. I guess it's not fair to call Zorn an improviser a lot these days, because I think a lot of his stuff is really composed and structured. I really love him. I really love what he does, and I would always go and see what he's doing. But there's a lot of different people. I really like this sax player Charles Gale that's been getting a lot of notice of late.
Gale?
Yeah, Charles Gale, Gayle. He's an older guy. He's been playing sax for years and years and years, and up until the last couple of years when people have taken notice of him again, his main gig was like playing in the subway, basically, for loose change, and just playing this amazing stuff, and having people walking by on their way to work. But he seems to be getting another round of notice again. I really like Rudolph Gray's Blue Humans a lot for sort of improvised work that really spans a gap, considering he was doing the same stuff in the late 70s no wave days, and he's still recently taken up doing it again. I really like that.
G-R-A-Y or E-Y?
I think it's A-Y. I'm not positive. I think it's A-Y. His stuff is really good. Thurston's been instrumental in getting some of his stuff released again, and that stuff's really good.
How much improvisation is there on the new Sonic Youth record, do you think?
There's quite a lot. Have you heard the record?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, there's quite a lot. Like a lot of those extended songs are really like the Diamond Sea, which is the last one, and there's a couple others, Washing Machine and Unwind. There's quite a lot of sections on this record that have real open sort of free playing going on, where we sort of know what keys we're dealing with, and how long it's supposed to go on. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot of other specified information there. It's different every night on some of those songs, and it was we purposefully kept it that way by not nailing it down. And some of the songs on that record are tracked in our demo studio, like our rehearsal room, where I have an 8-track machine set up, and we record stuff of the last few years we've just been working stuff out like that. And one thing we loved about those recordings, and why we used some of them in the end on the record, was the fact that they were just really spontaneous sounding, and some of them were maybe the first day that we got a song to really gel and click in, and we played it in such a natural, the first time it really flowed in that perfectly natural way before you refine it further. And we really loved that aspect of it, even if in the case of some of those demo recordings, they weren't necessarily the most hi-fi thing, or or they weren't there's some bum notes here or there or something, but the spirit in which the sound of the way it's so casually played was what we really liked. And so when we went to Memphis to do the actual recordings, we really tried to keep it like that. We kept a very loose schedule where we'd go in and play for a while, and if we'd get bored or if we just didn't feel like it was right, we would just leave the studio and go eat barbecue or something like that and come back later or the next day. And we really tried to make it very casual so that when we got things to click, it felt that it was that same kind of like not grinding things into the ground, trying to perfect them, which is also a reason why we produced this record ourselves instead of going with someone like Butch, who did the last couple records, just because we found it was getting too much about that aspect of it, the perfectionist kind of record-making mentality. And, we definitely polished these songs to some degree, but not nearly to the degree we did on the last couple records. And I'm more into that at this point. I'm more into records. Dirty. Yeah, to some degree, I'm happier with records coming out like that at this point, just because you can kind of, polish them forever, and it doesn't always make them better for all that extra work you put in, And I like the idea that they can be closer to an actual document of something. And on this record, we were all playing live on all the tracks, and we wanted to keep that feel.
Oh, I was going
Hold
to
on
ask
half a second. I thought I heard somebody knocking at my door.
So most of the band was there when you recorded each track?
Oh yeah, they're all tracked live. I don't think there's any songs that we did other than that way. And we've done most of our last few records that way, but this one in particular had a, we really were able to do the live thing, and it was very easy. It was very, very comfortable.
Have you settled into that tuning, the one tuning?
What do you mean?
The pavement tuning?
No, we don't actually use that tuning on our record. Thurston uses that tuning almost exclusively on his solo record.
Oh, I see.
But we don't use that tuning. I love that tuning. I mean, I like to play around with it at home, but we didn't really use it at all on our record.
What like, for instance, would Saucer like be in?
Saucer like is in. There's a few pretty common tunings on this record that we use an awful lot, and that's not to say that Thurston and I are in the same tuning on most songs, but we're in complementary tunings. But that tuning on Saucer Like, for me, is an old one. Actually, we're probably in the same tuning on that song. It's what we used to call the Death Valley tuning. It's low pair of F sharps, middle pair of F sharps, and then on the high end. Oh no, wait, that's what it started out as. It was double F sharp low, double F sharp middle, and then E and B on the high end. And then for a bunch of the songs on this record, I altered it. So the lowest string, the sixth string, I guess, is, how did it work? Of the low two pairs, the bottom one of each pair got changed. One went up to A and one went down to E, but I'm not sure which one it is. I think it was E F sharp, A F sharp, E B. I think that's what it ended up being. Although that A and E at the low end might be reversed.
This is kind of a crazy question, but do you imagine parts before you find tunings, or do your parts come out of tunings you discover?
They usually come out of the tunings, although sometimes you hear a part in your head and you set about sort of, devising a tuning that'll allow that part to be actualized. Sometimes you hear something and it has to do with, a certain confluence of tones next to each other or something like that, or a certain place on the fretboard, and you just go in reverse and try and figure out how to do it.
Now, you wrote Saucer Like and Skip Tracer, right?
Well, we all wrote the music to all of it together.
Oh.
I wrote the lyrics to those two. But we write all the music before we have any lyrical ideas at all. Almost always. I mean, the last record, there were a couple of songs that we wrote lyrics at the same time that we had the music. But Sonic Youth's thing has pretty much always been musical composition first, and then like in the few weeks before the record, people take different songs home and write lyrics for them. So I wrote the lyrics for those two, but pretty much all the songs are group composed otherwise.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, on No Queen Blues, what did you bring to the song, and what did Thurston bring?
Well, on No Queen, I like that song a lot.
Yeah, it's a fine song.
That song has, I play the really snaky lead-like lines.
Those sick wah scratches?
What?
The sick wah scratches in the beginning?
No, Thurston's doing that.
Oh, I see.
And then I'm doing the actual more straight lead guitar stuff throughout that song. That's sort of like Cat Up on Tiptoes lead kind of thing. I don't know exactly what you call it.
It sounded to me like early Jorma Kaukonen almost.
Huh, that's interesting, because I was really into him in his early period. I mean, I used to really love his playing, incredibly so.
It reminded me of the Wooden Ships tone.
Oh, yeah, well, actually that's not that guitar, but we have another tuning that is used on this record for Diamond C that is a real Wooden Ships kind of tuning. I mean, that's exactly what I hear in that tuning is Wooden Ships.
What's the secret of that tone?
It's a Les Paul that has a Les Paul that has a additional pickup added in between the first two, and it's played with a lot of the treble rolled off, so it's really warm and round and not too biting in a way.
Yeah.
The other thing that I love about that song is that that's the one song on the record that also straddles the line from the demo recordings that a couple of the other songs are, and the Memphis recordings that most of the stuff is, in that the first like minute or two of that song where all those scratchy stuff is happening, that's a demo recorded in our 8-track studio. And then right as it kicks into the actual song proper, it's cross-faded to the 16-track mix. So I love this thing that happens in that song. It's pretty subtle, but at the beginning, it's pretty sort of like ratty and lo-fi, and then it gets a little bit more airy and open as it kicks into the song proper. And it's got a complicated little overlap there where as the first vocal hits, just about all instrumentation except my guitar becomes 16-track recording, and we kept for the first verse and chorus. For the first verse, we kept my 8-track lead lines, and then when the second verse hits, I'm back in the 16-track domain as well. So there's also this other like tonal shift that happens.
Wow.
So I'm really
cool.
happy with. I was really proud of the way that we managed to seam that one together. That was really fun.
How did Junkie's Paradise come to be?
Junkie's Promise.
Promise?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. It just came from, that was a real early one that we wrote, and it just came from a riff that Thurston had that we developed, and it always felt like this real, like, dirty Neil Young kind of riff, you know?
Yeah.
That song came together pretty fast, actually. For a long time, we would, every once in a while we make up a song that we sort of play, and it almost sounds too conventional, and we sort of keep playing it, but we sort of look down on it or something, and that song was in that straight for a long time where we had it together, but we never quite, felt like it was really worthy of being a song. And then in the last week or so, we just jazzed it up and fucked around with that ending section where it gets all out of control, and it's a pretty fun song.
Speaking of out of control, that solo in Saucer, like kind of the 8 Miles High thing. Was that you or Thurston?
That's me.
Nice, man.
Yeah, that stuff came out really good. Yeah.
What were you playing there?
Well, what do you mean? What guitar? Or?
Yeah.
That's a Travis Bean, actually. Travis Bean artist model, which I use a lot on this record, actually.
One of those old ones.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a small collection of those. I really like those guitars, or I went through a period where I really loved them. So I've got 2 or 3 of them. I really like the sound of them. So that's what's going on that song.
When I listen to Washing Machine, I hear a very, very old blues riff, like the John Hurt Funky Butt Buddy Bolden riff. Are you aware of that riff?
Sure.
Was that
if it's what I think you're talking about, it's maybe in the second part of the song,
right.
A little bent note.
Right.
Yeah, that's my playing as well. It's also got a kind of Creedence-y thing to it because it's got that little picked thing. We thought that was really a cool thing because it took this song that was going one place and added this whole other element of a very familiar sounding kind of riff to it.
Yeah.
That song has been really a fun sort of centerpiece live.
Yeah,
which is really cool.
Who came up with the really catchy guitar section before she starts saying I was walking up the street?
The second part, like when she's talking?
Yeah.
Well, again, that's pretty much just me and Thurston playing off each other, trying to get something happening there.
Wow.
I don't know, for a while that song wasn't gelling, and then what I ended up doing is I play that Travis Bean with that tuning we just talked about for the first half of that song, and then in that breakdown section where it drops down briefly to just bass and drums, I swap over to a Les Paul in a G tuning for the second half of the song. So that also gives it this really cool tonal shift, because in the first part, Thurston and I are both playing in these F sharp tunings, and then halfway through, he shifts key to G, but I actually shift guitars as well.
Can you do that on stage,
Oh,
too?
yeah, I do it every night, yeah.
Who does the whammy stuff?
That's Thurston.
Oh, yeah.
That long, sick lead thing in the second section.
That's a ass-kicking solo.
Yeah, that's really good. Hold on half a second.
Yeah.
Getting some breakfast sent up here.
All right.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
about ready for some, too. You all set?
Yep.
Oh, and the piano type fade out, is that you?
That's both of us, actually, on the way out there.
Interesting sound.
Yeah. Yeah, so that came out really good.
Does Kim play guitar on this record?
Kim plays a lot of guitar on this record. Yeah, an awful lot. Can you hold on for half a second?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, she plays guitar on more. She plays guitar on more of the record than she plays bass on, actually, which has been really fun. When we actually got down to to making the record and to getting to the mix mode, one thing we realized at that point was that it was a little strange because there's a lot of bottom missing on some of the songs on these records compared to
there's no bass.
Yeah, and it never really presented it as anything that was a problem until we started mixing and songs were sort of unconventionally light on the bottom, and it took us a while to realize, well, that's just par for the course when there's no bass on the songs.
The Doors never had a bass player.
Very true. Although they had people sit in on a bunch of different tracks.
On the records.
Yeah, but they never had a bass player live. Ray would always hold it down with his keyboard bass.
Unwind is a very pretty song. Was that your riff?
It's me playing this sort of Spanish guitar kind of thing in that song, but it's pretty much, again, something that developed between the three of us just playing around in rehearsal.
Do you play eyeball to eyeball in the studio?
What do you mean?
Like, are you standing in the same room with Thurston?
Oh yeah, all four of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, drums too.
Yeah.
Everything is just very lightly baffled, and as little baffling as possible, actually.
How would you characterize Kim's guitar style?
Well, I think her guitar style is pretty interesting. I mean, it'd probably be cool if you talked to her about it at some point, if that's possible.
Is she part of the moratorium on Guitar Magazine?
I don't know. I know that's Thurston's thing, but I don't know if she's part of it or not. I think her guitar style is really cool because she's not. I mean, in general, the thing I like about her playing is that she's not like a schooled player, and I don't mean that in the sense of like having taken lessons or anything, but most guys sat around with records and picked up riffs off records and stuff like that, and she never did that. So she doesn't have a lot of those built-in riffs clogging up her head that a lot of guys do when they play.
The cliches.
Yeah. And certainly both Thurston and I have that to some extent or other, where we've listened to a lot of records and copped things off records, or we've listened with an ear towards that kind of thing, and she doesn't have that. So I mean, in some cases her playing is pretty rudimentary, and in some songs, even though she's playing a 6-string guitar, it functions as a very bass-like thing. I don't know. I really like the parts she does. She tends to get into these really repetitive, rhythmic parts that, in another way, approximate a bass type, movement.
Yeah.
But the fact that she's playing in an altered tuning as well at this point, which I don't even know what it is. I don't even know like what the main key of it is or something. I think it's in G's, but I'm not really sure. It just adds a whole other element to the thing. It gave this record a much needed dose of sort of like an additional chaotic element, which I was really happy about.
Joe Gore wanted me to ask you if you found any new creepy pedals.
Oh man, did we? We have 2 of the creepiest pedals on this record that you could ever imagine or desire. The one is an old Maestro ring modulator.
Oh, yeah.
And I use a lot these days. I really love it. I use it a lot when I play solo, and I use it a lot on stage, and I used it on the record on a bunch of different places, which I really love it. It's got that real outer spacey kind of sound going on with it. And the other pedal, which I use on the middle break of Junkie's Promise, that sort of like crazy wah sound, and Thurston uses it at the head of Diamond C for another kind of a wah-wah sound. Really bizarre pedal. It's a Ludwig guitar synthesizer is what it's called, like a Phase 1 or something. I don't know exactly what it's called, but it comes in like a little suitcase. It's a little metal suitcase, and you unfold the front. It's like you unfold one side of it that becomes like a foot pedal, like a wah-wah kind of pedal,
Wow.
with a bunch of switches on it, and then you lift back a plate on the top, and there's all kinds of modifying sliders to for envelope and stuff like that. It's really a sick thing. I've never seen anything like it before, and it's capable of all kinds of insane, crazy phasing and wah and synthetic kind of sounds. It's a gorgeous thing, and Thurston plays that live on stage, and we're looking for another one so that we can each have one. It's really great.
Right now, what's the best feedback machine for you?
Feedback?
Yeah.
As far as what? You mean like a pedal or?
A guitar and a setup, I guess, yeah.
Well, I don't know. For me, pretty much any guitar that's got, I don't know, it doesn't even, that's got humbucking pickups on it and a good amp. I know it really feedback comes down to the guitar and the amp connection, and I tend to like humbucking pickups for it, although actually the Les Paul is not humbuckings, and that song is one of the prime feedback culprits in the set these days. So
what about amps then?
Amps?
Yeah.
I play out of this amp that I really love at the moment that I just started playing out of between the time we made the last record. No, I guess I used it on the last record too. It's a Fender Custom Shop model called the Tone Master.
Oh yeah.
And it's a really dynamite amp. I'm really in love with it. And that's pretty much my amp of choice these days. I mean, the one thing I would say about it is it's almost a slight bit too loud at 100 watts. And I was talking to them about possibly putting in a switch to step it down to 50 watts for when I wanted to. Yeah. But it's a really great amp. And I use that, and I use the Fender cabinets, too, from the Custom Shop. I've got a 4x12 and a 2x12. The kind that has those little legs on the side so you can cant it back. And they make a Fender reverb unit that's kind of a copy of the original Fender 57 or 59 reverb unit. And so I've got that as well, because that's the one thing about the Tone Master is it doesn't have a reverb unit inside it.
Oh,
so that's pretty much my setup at the moment.
When did you learn anything about attaining massive sound from your tour with Neil Young?
Well,
did anything he do soak in to Sonic Youth?
One thing that he did that I would have to say soaked in to some degree. I mean, we're pretty far along in our own thing at this point by the time we met Neil. And I've been a huge Neil Young fan since the moment I started playing guitar, many years ago. I mean, his early records, like after the Gold Rush, I used to be able to play every song on, and that's really how I learned to play guitar. Yeah. And, his cohorts, like the Crosby, Stills, and Nash guys, I mean, they were sort of among the earliest people that I was aware of that were playing in odd tunings. And, it's really one place where I started to get a hint of being able to play with other tunings.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I was really impressed about with him was how in control of his sound he was.
Yeah.
How amazingly studied his amp sounds were, and his he has it down to a science. I mean, he's got a custom-made foot switch. He's got all these old pedals, and he's got a custom-made foot switch that he uses to trigger them all. Yeah. What? Yeah, and one of the things that one of those switches does is actually physically turn the knobs on top of his old Fender Deluxe amp, and I just thought that was amazing. Attention to detail. I mean, I just never pictured him to be a guy that was that, involved in that side of what he does.
Yeah.
But when you hear him play, and when you hear the way his guitar sounds in those arenas, I mean, it's just amazing. It's just astounding.
Weren't
you setting up an interview with him or something?
What's that?
Last time I spoke to Joe, he said something about you were trying to get an interview with Neil.
I did one a few years ago, but he's really reticent this time around. So we didn't have any luck with that.
Is he just not basically doing interviews right now?
Yeah, he just doesn't like to give interviews.
When I saw one that he did for the new record.
Yeah.
That was in an online magazine.
I heard about it. Yeah, I heard he had done that one.
Yeah, that one was really cool.
Yeah.
Really good interview.
He's a great interview once you sit him down.
I'll bet.
You know, some of the stuff we did ended up in Harper's.
Uh-huh.
But,
wow. That's an odd place.
Yeah, yeah. I'll wrap this up real soon. Let me ask you this. What can kids who are stuck listening to tuning to A440 and doing things by the book gain from listening to more primitive sounding artists like blues artists who don't follow standard tuning and things like that?
Well, I guess they can just they can hopefully gain an understanding of the fact that there's, a huge world of ways to make sound out there, and they're not that's needed to be tied to standard tuning, an A440, and listening to real primitive stuff. And I mean that's another place where I got my first dose of like alternate tunings, was listening to old blues guys, Reverend Gary Davis or Mississippi John Hurt, or any of those people that were playing slide guitar back then. A lot of them were playing in odd tunings, and basically just making it up as they went along, making up their own school of thought on the matter. And I think that's a really amazing, I think that's really an amazing thing to take from those players.
Can you suggest how someone could start going about destroying and rebuilding his sound?
Well,
if you're stuck, with that blues tone or something.
Yeah, I think it mainly comes from having a concept. I think it mainly comes the place to start for that kind of thing is to realize that you want to get into some sort of territory that's less explored, and that like one of the things that a lot of guitar players are faulted. You can fault them for is that you look to cop stuff from other players. And I mean that's the way everybody learns, obviously. But there's a whole school of people whose the emulation factor is really high. And I think the first thing to realize is that you want to try and look for stuff that doesn't sound like anybody else. That sounds really like something you're hearing in your head that you're not able to hear anywhere. On a record or live situation. And I think that once that shift of mind is made, it gets a lot easier. You just sort of catch yourself when you lapse into somebody else's language.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy to do that on guitar, just to all of a sudden find yourself playing a Clapton riff or whatever it is. You're playing Jimmy Page's riff or something. It's like, I don't know. I don't find that interesting at all.
Yeah. Lee, this gives me plenty to work with. I'm really grateful for the interview, and especially for putting out East Jesus.
Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Cool.
Okay. Well, thanks a million.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This concludes our 1995 interview. In addition to his contributions to modern music, Lee has produced a wide array of wonderful works as a writer and artist. I invite you to check out his website and his Wikipedia page. Before signing off, I want to thank my producer, engineer, and friend Nick Hunt. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.